Om Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunektu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we're looking at the caste system, and we have the four castes: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. And we were just looking at Brahmana last week, and none of this is, as we recognize, it's not by birthright. It's upon the gunas, of what gunas are predominant in you and how you perform in your activities, what's within you and how you perform. So sattva, rajas, and tamas, which we were looking at in the previous topic of the personality traits. So the predominance of sattva is in the Brahmana, and it gradually gets lower as you go to a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. Not to say that if you're to cultivate your spiritual well-being, you're to cultivate sattva, early to bed, early to rise. Sattva. So that freshness in the morning got to capture you for this type of knowledge. So sattva. So the qualities of a sattvic person, a Brahmana, a person who looks at the interest of the whole, thinks for the whole. They cultivate certain qualities within themselves, they become that, and then they think for the whole. Sattvic. So let's, we'd left off on 42. Has anybody any question before we go ahead? This whole caste system is very criticized everywhere because it's misused, and it's as though it's your birthright. And that's the, you know, if you're a tamasic person and claiming to be a Brahmin, the two don't match up. And if your actions are such and manipulative, they don't match up. So that's not a Brahmin. It's not birthright. Okay.
I did slip a little question into the reminder.
So go ahead. Shall we?
I'm not sure you would like this question, but I just
doesn't matter if I like or not.
From the public arena, can you pick out someone who is from each of the four castes?
Well, if I pick somebody out, that's actually, sorry, are you talking about from the public arena?
Yes, so it's not personal to your life, just.
Well, it's not for me to comment on what other people are doing, broadly speaking. But you see it. I can't deny that my guru is a sattvic person or beyond that. So, you know, he's a public figure. You see in the arena when there's not thinking going on. But this, as we're coming to the Kshatriya, we see the quality of, there's still chivalry and gallantry going on. There's still that value of, which is bigger, but it's not directed to truth as such, but it's directed to bigger things in the society. So you can see people, maybe scientists who look at the interest of the whole or the good. In that sense, they serve in that way, they're innovative in that way, they have a refinement about them doesn't mean to say they're a Brahmana, but they've got that qualities. So we're coming on to that. And you see people as we go along into this who are like that. It's good to think about it, but we never know what's going on in somebody's mind for sure. We can only see the exterior. So these are our guidelines to actually check ourselves. If you've got examples, you're welcome to put forward.
I quite agree. You don't know what's going on in someone else's mind. It was a very silly question, but sometimes silly questions are profound. So a Brahmana might be in the public arena, Einstein.
Not necessarily, unless he was looking at truth in the sense of truth in just getting to the self. If you can say that he did have a God theory, God concept, and that must have been in his mind. There's an element of that going on. We don't know really what's going on as a whole. No, it's not a part-time pastime, it's full-time awareness. So maybe you're right. I don't know, the truth. You know, you don't know for sure. But these are examples that we may aspire to because they're doing things far more greater than most of society. Right. You know, the politicians may be of a certain category, the business people are some. That's actually what it's putting forward. So to put names to it is, unless, you know, we don't know for sure. You see traits of people. One, you know, in the past I've mentioned somebody like Djokovic. You see traits of people because it's blatantly obvious when he talks and when he talks about things. It's not the tennis, and that's the first and foremost thing that everybody knows him for. The refinement of his game. But that's not what it is for him. It's something higher, and he's blatant in his talk of it's something bigger, not this for me. So he's delivering that. Whether he is a full-time Brahmana or a Kshatriya, we don't know. But that's what he's portraying in the public eye. So it's admirable and inspiring for us. So we can utilize characters like that to evolve to our own natures.
Isha had a point.
Isha.
Yeah, just to assist with my understanding of this topic, is it then that the caste, it's not dependent on your birth line, and you can move out of the caste, you can move out of it subject to how you think, what you do, etc. during this journey. So you can actually, so it's not determined by your family, it's not determined by which family you're born into, and you can move out of it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the point.
Okay.
It's also a point that if you're a Brahmana or if you're a Shudra, it doesn't make any difference. If you're true in your purity, your motivation, you see, you could be a Shudra if you're cultivating sattva, and those are your traits as a Shudra, you will soon become a Brahmana. And if you're a Brahmana not cultivating that refinement, you'll soon become in that other predicament. So it's like saying each one is best suited to one's own vasanas at the time. So whether you're service orientated, trading orientated, whether you've got that gallantry chivalry, whether you're a thinker, whichever one you are, it really doesn't matter. That's best suited for you to evolve your vasanas, fulfill them. So it's acknowledging it and doing the optimum in whatever your nature is about. And it's no better, no worse. It's not a good or a bad, it's just an acknowledgement. This is what suits my nature, so let me amplify it. be it one or the other. But that's not what happens in society. They're manipulated. So once you understand this, you know, I've been brought up in a particular type of environment, family when I was younger. The environment was a very business community, and also mixed because of my parents. They made it mixed. A few families made it mixed to elevate those high values, whether they realized it or not. Philosophical value had a trait of a few things. But many in the community, we had so many different samajas, one of which is a Brahm Samaj, which is a gathering of Brahmins. There's nothing Brahmin in that society except eat, get together. There's nothing Brahmin about it. Brahm Samaj. What Samaj? I don't know. It certainly wasn't Brahmin, that's for sure. There was no philosophy or thinking going on in that Samaj. And you'd meet with dinner and eating and gossiping and whatever. But they had a good satsang, but that's about it. And good satsang at that level, not at the level that we meet in this class. So it's manipulated, and everybody is really proud to be Brahmin. There's nothing Brahmin about them. To this day, I know them all. So they are doing they're all Vaishyas. They're doing best what suits them. Good for them. They're succeeding in their life. But you've got to acknowledge it and do the best by whatever your nature is. That's the point. Let's go. Vidya.
I mean, just answering to Tim's question, asking about somebody in public life, and today being Gandhiji's birth anniversary, I thought I'll use Gandhiji as a good example. Now, he's born into a family where predominantly they would have taken into business, but he chose to study law. And then he was a Vaishya for some time, but then he became a Kshatriya when he was fighting the Indian independence movement. But he was not a true Kshatriya. He was more a Brahmana because he didn't take to arms. He took the non-violence movement, where he showed a lot of Brahmana qualities of non-violence and fighting for what is right, but in the non-violent way, the ahimsa way. So in that, he demonstrated he was a Brahmana. So the point goes that one can become all of these depending on the choices we make. And even for us as a person, the way I see myself, when I'm at work, I'm more a Vaishya. I'm doing a lot of business related work. When I'm standing up for a cause, when I'm fighting for something, I'm more a Kshatriya. At the end of the day, I'm very tired and I'm lazy and I want to do non-thinking activities. I'm a Shudra. And in the morning, when I get up and do my morning study, I'm a Brahmana, where I'm trying to get some sattvic time for myself. So I think eventually, whichever is the predominant trait, as what Parulji said, where Swamiji's predominant trait is sattvic and being a Brahmana. So he predominantly defaults to that state. And that's evidenced in everything that he does and how he role models to everybody else. And that's how we see caste, and not the caste that we are born into.
Good example. So you could be doing any one of these activities. It's how you do it. And you to cultivate sattva. That's the idea. I remember there was in the academy, there's one chap, he's no longer there, unfortunately. He was like Swamiji's right-hand person in terms of corrections in the writing. He was very knowledgeable. You could ask him, if you ever wanted to know, you could go to him, ask him anything, because he had that sort of historic background of but when it would come to, we have something called campus cleanup in the academy, where everybody in the academy, instead of doing sports that morning, or yeah, we have the yoga still, but instead of doing your sports that morning, we clean the campus, and it's ridiculous because the campus is so clean anyway. So you really have to look, if you're the litter picker, you really have to it's like trying to search for treasure. And if there's been workers, you go straight there because you know there'll be something you can gain. But everybody, and especially during monsoon time, it gets mossy green. Everything needs a bit of a cleanup so it's not slippy and it looks, tidy up. So many things to do, from raking, from at one time it was rice planting, we used to have rice fields. So many jobs are there. Now, this chap, I can't say his name, you won't meet him, but it's not fair to, because he's genuinely got that Brahmana side to him as much. But he decided, in sort of a traditional way he'd brought up, that he doesn't do any physical activity. So to clean something, clean your balcony, clean the floor, clean it, or to do some weeding or anything like that, it was beyond him. So every campus cleanup, he'd never turn up. His name would be on the list for something or another. He'd never turn up because his attitude was, I'm a Brahmana, I don't do things like that. In fact, his attitude was, I'm a Brahmana, I don't do things like the Westerners can do it because they're not Brahmin. That was his very restrictive, non-thinking attitude in that department. In other departments, very smart, very sharp, and very sincere. Everybody would go to learn from him. But that was his attitude. So this came to Swamiji's attention. So on campus cleanup, when all the jobs were being allocated, Swamiji looked at his name on the list and says, put me there. So Swamiji placed himself in this person's balcony. We call him, I won't say his name, but I can say the name we used to call him, Krishna Bhagwan. That means God in the sense we used to tease him in a nice way. Swamiji placed himself in his balcony to clean the moss, to scrub the moss from the floor, to show him you can't think like that. That's not a thinker. There's a collective endeavor to raise. You have to also do it. Never think you are part. Maybe you have important work to do, but you've also got to act as the collective if you're to be that example. You have to do everything. Maybe you can't do some things, but you have to participate. So he was there in his balcony, Swamiji, scrubbing the moss floor. And then it pricked to him, and he apparently came out and said, Swamiji, don't do that, because so your guru is cleaning. How can you let them do that? It's embarrassing. He says, I will do it. So he came out then and cleaned the balcony when he saw his own guru doing it, his guru doing his balcony. So it's understanding we get these funny ideas and we get locked into what we are. But the flexibility of a Brahmana to participate in all, because it's actually looking for the whole. It doesn't mean to say you suddenly always do those things. Your concentration won't be there, but when it's needed, you're a collective. You're part of it. That's the way people will grow. That's your interest. Such. So anyway, let's go.
Shamodhamastapah saucham shantir arjamavev vacha jnanam vijnanamastikyam brahma karma swabhavajam.
So 42. Isha, if you could read 42.
Verse 42, serenity, self-restraint, austerity, purity, forgiveness, uprightness, also knowledge, wisdom and faith are characteristic of Brahmana born of his nature.
So all these qualities of a Brahmana. So if you don't have them, at least theoretically keep them in your mind so you can grow them. you have some of them, keep cultivating that. It's nobody's business but yours to do it. You're the benefactor of it. And then inevitably the spillover benefits the world. So that's important. So a Brahmana acts in the following ways, which was mentioned here. Shama, serenity. So they have a control at the mental level. They're not rushing about. Their actions or activities are serene, composed. A cultured person. So if you've got one of these qualities, it's enough. So Dhamma, self-control, a sense of the senses are under control because you standardized everything, so they can't manipulate you. You know, when you standardize your life to some degree, the outward sensations can't make you feel, I want that, because you actually don't want that any longer. You come to that evolution, you're just not interested. So all the marketing, all the people, all the entertainment can't grab you there because you're contented with what you have. You've streamlined, standardized, you've taken that middle path, as it were. You've got a physical control, a mental control. You're able to end that perception with the perception. And in no way does it mean that you don't enjoy it. It actually means you've got the optimum to enjoy in the world. So what you're doing in the world, you enjoy it. Not miserable about it. There's no rush and there's worry and anxiety where that creeps in and starts hitting you. It's streamlined. Tapaha, austerity. So when you are streamlined, you've got that simplicity, you're able to channelize your energies for something higher. So there's the least direct distraction. He mentions purity, socham. We've heard this throughout the whole of the Gita. Socham comes in 20 qualities of a jnani, comes in 25 qualities of a bhakta, it comes in chapter 16. And it comes so many different places. It comes in chapter 70. Socham. What does socham mean? Allergic to dirt. It doesn't mean just physical dirt. So it's anything extra distracting you in your environment. You might start with the gross first, so keeping your environment tidy, neat, not keeping the things that you don't need. So that streamlined standardization again. Keeping it, so then it's more available for you to go within to your own emotions, you know, keeping yourself to whatever you need outwardly prevents the distractions inwardly. So clean out, then you can start refining your emotions, your perceptions, your thoughts, pitching them onto something higher. Brahmana has forgiveness consciously. A true Brahmana understands there's nothing to actually forgive. Because when you forgive, it's actually your own growth that you're endowing yourself with, your own growth. Each person acts in accordance to their own vasanas. It's got nothing to do with you as such. You might cross their path and get something that you didn't like, and there may be something which gets ruffled. But when you grow to that higher dimension, you have an understanding of the helplessness of the other person's predicament, of why they may have done what they've done. So it's not to be shallow or egotistical in the understanding, I forgive you, you've done me wrong. It's actually just to let it go. Doesn't matter. And it then allows you the space to not keep it in your mind and move on. To not waste your time. So there's a tolerance, an empathy, a sympathy, a goodness rather than a negative feeling that you carry forward. So one has to have that higher value to envisage the lacuna in another and oneself. What's missing? So arjavam, straightforwardness, not any selfish interests, just straightforwardness. You don't do something to get something out of it. You just do it because it's supposed to be done. And you're straightforward about it. Jnanam, knowledge, vijnanam, wisdom. So it's to correlate that knowledge within your life. This is a Brahmana, constantly correlating the knowledge of the higher values in one's life. That scriptural text to make one's intellect sharp, committed to one's unfoldment, to live wisdom. Faith, belief in an unknown reality. Not blind faith, but you've considered the facts. You move with that which you know to something which you don't know. So you keep that shraddha, consistency of purpose to the very end. There's something within you which you think there's something beyond you. So you pursue that with the facts that you have to hand. You keep building on that. Remember the example of the headlights. You know, you can see 200 yards in front of you. So you can drive that much. But that's not taking you all the way to your destination if it's 200 miles away. It's taking you 200 yards ahead. So you have faith when you've gathered all the facts of where your destination is, using the maps, using all the signs and the directions. So you have faith it's directing you to there. But you don't know it. You just know 200 yards ahead of you. It reminded me of a quote by Rabindranath Tagore, which I think all of you have heard. He talks on faith. Faith is a bird that feels the light, whilst the dawn feels the light and sings whilst the dawn is still dark. Faith is a bird that feels the light and sings while the dawn is still dark. So there's an understanding the light's going to come. So it carries on with consistency. So all these come from one's own vastness, from the past, that understanding what you have. You collect your facts and move forward. So purity, going back to that quality, comes, the whole of this, of a Brahmana, is moving from the gross to the subtle. And the purity one may start is refining what's out and around you to within, cleaning out your vasanas essentially. If you take any one of these traits, you'll get the whole. You'll become the whole. You'll be encompassing the others too. It's like that. So you might start with being particular about your presentation, your teeth, your nails, your hair, etc. Because somebody else has got to look at you being clean, etc. Never mind if you don't mind. Somebody else has got to look at you, be fair to them. But then you've got to go inside with your thoughts and emotions. What type of things are you cultivating? Somebody with character will always feel that another person can never do them any harm. That's a purity in oneself. And they also understand if something happens. There's that quote of Maurice Matlin, happy and blessed hour when wickedness stands forth revealed as goodness bereft of a guide. There's an understanding in the Brahmana that when something goes wrong, if the person didn't have a guide, then they weren't well informed or advised, that maybe they might make some mistakes, or it might not be as easy for them. So you understand it. When you've got a guide, you understand it's easier for you. That's about all the differences. So happy and blessed hour when wickedness stands forth revealed as goodness bereft of a guide. So wickedness is just one who's bereft of a guide. Nothing more, nothing less. So one can't pass any more judgment on that. So you clean up the gross to be able to get to the subtle. Let's read it.
Paoji, in this list of the qualities of a Brahmana, there isn't the quality that we would often use in English of hope.
So the Brahmana, in cultivating these qualities, or many other qualities are put forward throughout the Gita. These are just a selected few here. In cultivating your sattva, hope goes out of the window, because you're cultivating to the best of your ability what you can in the present, and hope's an inference of the future. So when you fix your focus on the future, you're actually diverting yourself from your present. So hope is something which, in actual fact, there's the Shakespearean quote. I forget which play it's from. I'll have to look it up. It says, when remedies are past, our griefs are ended, which of late hope had depended. So when there's been there was a tragedy, and when everything has been done, when all the remedies have been done, your grief's ended. There's no point in getting hooked onto that, which in the past you were always hoping would get better or be okay. So that hope is projecting the future. Our whole philosophy is trying to keep us in the present action, so we optimize what we've got. So we don't necessarily use hope, perhaps in that sense, but maybe often used hope as an encouragement, perhaps in another environment. We'll use it, that not to go for the future, be hooked on the future, keep yourself present. It's by cultivating these sorts of things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Misha, if you'd like to read.
The nature of a Brahmana priest class is predominantly sattvic. Its characteristics are enumerated in the verse. Shamaha, serenity. The mind remains calm and composed when it is under control of the intellect, unperturbed by the senses, free from sensual thought. Dharma, self-restraint. With mind under control, the body does not plunge into discriminate sensual indulgence. It observes self-control. Tapaha, austerity. Tapa, austerity. Exercising control of mind and body, a Brahmana lives an austere life. He conserves energy, otherwise dissipating into unproductive channels in the world, and directs it towards spiritual evolution. Saucham, purity. A Brahmana maintains purity at all levels. A clean environment, fit and healthy body, chaste emotion, divine thought. Is that Shantiya? Kashati, forgiveness. Manifests with growth in stature, like an adult looking at the pettiness of a child. A Brahmana of great maturity regards others with forgiveness for their childish involvement in the world.
Arjavam.
Arjavam, uprightness, being straightforward. A Brahmana lives a noble life, with no self-interest in the mundane world, free from a false life. Jnanam, knowledge, and Vijnanam, wisdom. The words cha-eva or ka-eva, cha-eva, and even are introduced before the next three traits. Jnanam, knowledge, Vijnanam, wisdom, and astikam, faith. They seem to indicate additional qualities of a class of Brahmanas committed to spiritual unfoldment. Jnanam here refers to knowledge of self. Vijnanam to actual application and experience of the knowledge. These Brahmanas not only possess knowledge, but live it through life. Astikyam, faith, is also a prerequisite for spiritual evolution. A firm belief in the unknown reality until one comes to know it. With such faith and conviction alone can one progress to enlightenment. A Brahmana seeker has the faith. The above characteristics of a Brahmana spring from his own divine nature, vasanas, acquired by past action. As long as his vasanas last, the traits manifest themselves.
So all of these to be cultivated at the physical, mental, intellectual level, the spiritual level. So the Brahmana is always thinking of self-enfoldment. First and foremost, all the things come into play as such. Always channelizing their energies. See, if you're doing one, all the others come into play. You can't allow the distraction of the mundane if you're channelizing something higher. You need to have that self-restraint. Tim.
So in the very last paragraph of the commentary, it says, the vasanas are your divine nature.
So you're reading the above
characteristics of a Brahmana spring from his own divine nature or vasanas.
So go ahead.
Well, you know, we talk a lot about vasanas, and I don't always think of them as one's divine nature. Can you just explain?
So they are your nature. A Brahmana is channelizing that sattvic nature. So whatever your vasanas are, they're channelizing all of that for their unfoldment. So everything is geared to that. So that's their nature, that's their predominance. The confusing part is they may have those traits from when they're very young, when they're born, just as a matter of their own vasanas. They may be endowed with that socham or restraint naturally, because that's what they've cultivated from the past in accordance to the way we look at the whole of the knowledge in terms of your karma, your birth, incarnation back into the world, as it were. So you may be with that vasanas, but if they are those vasanas, they're only to get out to the self, transcend to the self. So the vasanas are heading in the direction to truth. That's it. They're not bank robbing vasanas, if you get what I mean. Or they're not vasanas which are subservient, passive in a negative direction. They're always, their predominance is going in that direction to truth. So they're divine. You exist in this planet. that aspect is backing, your vasanas are backing to get to truth. So, not sure if that's what you're wondering. You see very young people, sometimes, you know what's very interesting, when I was been in the academy, you see younger people with sharper intellects than yourself. And you may have been cultivating your intellect. And it's almost like, I remember, you know, Swami does things to provoke us. When we were studying, he'll bring things. I remember one time he brought one chap in whose parents wanted him to, they couldn't handle him, in fact. He was a real numbskull, I don't know if that's the right word. He was a real, very difficult challenging chap to handle. So his parents wanted him to stay in the academy. And not amazingly, unfortunately for us, Swamiji said yes. So he was there for about 6 months, and he turned us all upside down because he was a tearaway. But the thing about it was, he had a really sharp intellect. And he was utilizing his intellect when he was amongst his people in a way which was quite destructive. But being in the environment with the Kshatriya which we had, he was really constructive in his thinking, which pushed us to think, how do we handle this person, very challenging person? Because he had an answer and thought through process for many things, which sometimes was disruptive to the way we would like it to be, which is actually pretty good. Where did that come from? So that it was just being in that environment channelized it. He wasn't perfect by far, but he channelized those vasanas which he had in terms of being a Brahmana. That was his nature, and it did very well in that environment until some more Rajasic vasanas came up, and then he only stayed for 6 months, fortunate for us. Or unfortunate, put it whichever way you like. So some traits come up very strongly, heading in that direction. If you catch them, cultivate them, so it progresses your spiritual growth. There's all sorts of characters I've met in the academy where Swamiji's done some little tricks with us so that we further our own evolution. So vasanas, to evolve yourself, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're coming from. You want to evolve and you channelize that. Valmiki, who wrote the Ramayana, was a highway robber, dacoit. But then he switched to being a writer of this knowledge, decoder of the highest philosophy. So you may have that nature. Those vasanas may be Brahmana from whenever, may not have to be cultivated right now, you may have them inherently in you. And your job is to get to truth. And those are some qualities which give you a little bit of a flavor of it. Get your cultivation of what you're going to do. Yes, I don't know if that's useful. Sam, you had something.
Thanks. I'm just trying to understand who such a person is within the society. It seems like it's a priest role. So I guess my question is, how much involvement does a priest have in terms of the, because it says in the previous verse, 41, description about the Brahmanas is that they're original thinkers, their brains trust, the brains trust of a community. Just because nowadays we don't necessarily have priests like who are brain trusts of the community or original thinkers. When I read original thinkers, what came to my mind immediately was like philosophers or people who are involved in like politics, and people who are involved in social policies, like, yeah, politicians or philosophers or very highly educated people. And I'm not saying that priests aren't educated, but I don't know how much influence they have in terms of setting social policies and policies in general.
Okay.
So I was a bit confused.
So Brahmanas, they're the brain trust of cultivating that evolution, spiritual evolution. And part of spiritual evolution is what you do in your everyday. And you're quite right, you don't often see that in across the board of where you think it's supposed to be. You know, you might see all sorts of things going on in places of worship which are not really things of bigger values. So, you know, it's like that. Or you might see in the society where there are some things of great value, where people are looking at the whole. But where it's for evolution of the society for a spiritual sake, which will encompass all the other stages of society, that's the Brahmana. We don't obviously see it these days because it's far and few. But there is. There's very few places which are educating you to develop your intellect, the capacity to think and reason on bigger values. And one of the reasons that the Vedanta Academy was set up is to do that job alone and nothing else. Because it's not around, it's not in the education system. It's not available everywhere readily, as it should be, for people to think and grow spiritually. So it is confusing because you see different, you don't necessarily see a thinking process. It's much more mundane, much more full of superstition, blind beliefs, mechanical rituals in the religious sector, unfortunately. But there are those who are cultivating that too. Yeah. And it's not for a Brahmana to necessarily get involved in the mundane values of social policy as such, because that's more of a social work. It's actually for them to raise the social consciousness so people will naturally have that social policy. So if you've grown up, as a matter of fact, very simple, mundane thing I'm putting forward, if you live in this country and you see litter on the floor, I mean, I'm giving a stupid example, you pick it up, you don't leave it there on the floor. You go to India, you don't pick it up. It's full of rubbish. Now it's changing. So there's a social consciousness, awareness, but that might have come originally from a social work of policies that we shouldn't do this, we should do this. But if you're already refining yourself on bigger values, you don't want to fall a prey to the lower values. You don't want to be in a predicament where, say, something's not clean. You want to be in a better way. So you just do it automatically. So that's the Brahmana's role, if anything.
So, thank you. Mm-hmm.
So the thinking behind it gets implemented into the practicalities.
Yes. I guess what else that came to my head was that you're talking about spiritual masters in this case then, because I don't know to what extent the priests would be able to self-realize themselves. I guess what comes to my head again is priests within the Christian community who are not necessarily self-realized people, but they are devotional, selfless people to that higher value. But I don't know to what extent they have reached self-realization. And
you've got to be a Christ to reach self-realization. How many Christs are there?
Mm.
That's what you've got to think about. That's what it means.
Yeah.
How many Christs are there? So we're all in a evolution stage of that journey. It's not being taught in the religious institutions what it is to be a Brahmana. So they may have elements of it in pockets where it might be. But you've got to be able to think. It's not passive. Most religions are quite passive. Unfortunately, because teachers themselves have stopped thinking and hand it down in such a way that you just become sheep and followers. I would hate it if any of you were sheep and followers. You know, there's got to be a bit of fisticuffs now and again. Not really, but you know what I mean. So you're thinking, for goodness sake. And sometimes I might, you know, I think some of you have had experience where I might be a little bit sharp about something and you think, my gosh, well, good, it's okay, we get on with it. Keep cultivating that bigger value. You've got to think for yourself. That's a Brahmana. And then you're thinking in the interest of the whole when you're thinking. So how many of those people are around in society or culture or religion? Yes, it's far and few, because that thinking capacity's got lost. The ability to question these values has got lost. So that's why it's so important to cultivate it in yourself. Be that ambassador. Because you're cultivating your own evolution. Not because you're doing it for society. You cultivate your evolution, you will serve society, as a matter of fact. Difference between social work, social consciousness. Social work, when everything's going wrong, you've got to fix it. Social consciousness, you evolve yourself, you behave like that. Everybody will start fixing themselves. There won't be need to fix poverty because you'll have an element of sharing what you have. You're cutting the greed. It's not that there's not sufficient to go around. It's the fact that some are greedy and some that politics is going on. So that's social work to fix it on the plaster level, sticking back. Social consciousness is when you make an awareness that there's enough, everybody's got to have that consciousness to identify with the other person as themselves, so they will offer whatever they have and share. Less or more, it doesn't matter, it's the attitude. So where are those people? Where are those Brahmanas in society? If you're not seeing them, cultivate yourself to grow there. If you see one, grab hold of them and get everything you can from them and learn. Don't leave them alone. Get what you can from them and learn. If you get the right one, they'll be looking in your interest, the interest of the whole. It's okay. It is far and few between. There does need to be a cultivation of thinking at the mundane level and the spiritual level, because it's not even at the mundane level. That's why we've got wars and etc., X, Y, Z going on. Stress and mental illness in big ways. Let's go. 44.
Sauryam tejo dhritirdakshyam yudde cha api apalayanam danam ishvara bhavascha shatram karma svabhavajam.
Sam, if you could read the verse. Thanks.
Prose?
Perhaps.
Prose, splendor, steadfastness, dexterity,
Dexterity.
and also not fleeing from battle. Charity and lordliness are characteristic of Kshatriya, born of his nature.
So Our dear friend Arjuna is trying to flee from the battle. He's a Kshatriya, by the way, never lost a battle. And now he's trying to flee from this one where it's a bigger righteous cause. You don't flee from the battle or whatever's got to be done. You don't shy away. So a Kshatriya, remember, if you remember last week, we had that little table. We can put it up perhaps on our WhatsApp. Kshatriya, 20% sattvic. This is relative. It's just a projection. 70% rajasic, 10% tamasic, whereas the Brahmana is predominantly sattvic, a little bit of rajas and very few traits of tamas. It's a different scale. So here, 20%, 70%, 10%, roughly. We're just, giving you an idea of what it is. So they are gallant, full of prowess, slender, vitality, brightness, these traits. So they've got a charm about them in pursuing the mundane material things. There's a grandeur in what their pursuits are. So they do have a bigger interest. They look for the bigger causes. They've got that charm about them. They're quite innovative in that sense, a Kshatriya. They have that steadfastness, but it's mainly in the mundane, the worldly fields rather than the spiritual aspect, though there is that in them. There is a percentage of that spirituality, but it's more predominant in the rajas. So they have a steadfastness in whatever they do. They don't give up easily. Bhaksham, they're expert in what they do. They're prompt in their actions. They move on to the next thing. They don't delay things. So they've got that rajas to move on to the next to get it done. Dexterity, full of skill. You give them something to do, they'll get it done. It's not even being spiritual, not even channelizing something. They just think that's got to be done. They do it. They're skilled in it. They're capable of doing a good job. You might ask them to design a landscape or you might ask them to clean windows. It really doesn't matter. They'll do a good job. That skill, the flexibility, dexterous. They're noble and generous. Dhanam. Even if they don't have it in their pocket, they will share it. They'll find a way to get it and share it. When I was growing up, this is on a mundane value. I came to know later when this uncle passed away, not a real uncle, family friend uncle. He always dressed very, very modestly, very simply. And he had this thing. We all used to make jokes of him. He had this thing, he went around to every family, everybody, and got everybody to buy shares. It became a thing, buy shares in companies. So he was quite an entrepreneur in that sense. And everybody would get sick of him because he'd take each house he would go to, he'd say, here, sign this share form. You can have these shares for this amount. It's good investment. He was very much that way. And everybody was saying, oh, KG, whose name is Krishna Kambhai, KG, you want us to do this? What are you doing? Nobody could see it, what he was doing. But he himself was always a trader, as it were, or he was a trader on the outside. But when he passed away, in his funeral, so many people came forward. He wasn't interested in the money. He was interested in how he could utilize that money to do something bigger. So many people came forward and to say, Uncle Krishna Kant, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have been able to go to university, or we wouldn't have been able to do X, or in our town, he did X for us. So everything of his monetary value that he had performed was all to give back to something or another. He got a charm about the way he did it. And apart from that, everywhere he goes, he was sharing everything. I'm just giving you this little funny example. I remember it when we used to tease him. Oh, Krishna Cat's coming once. So sort of entrepreneur Kshatriya, but only with the idea. He had no interest. I remember on his daughter's wedding, I had to physically take this fellow to buy a suit for his daughter's wedding, because he was like, why do I need to get one? I'll just go as I am. I said, no, you've got to, your daughter wants you to get something, so I'm going to take you to get it. So he wasn't interested in the material things. It was just a way of doing something for him in his vasanas to do that. He was very charming about it too. In fact, he's a cross between a Vaishya and a Kshatriya, which we're coming to next. But there's also the type of person who has a nobility and a generosity which is slightly different than the person I'm talking about, which we will continue in the next class. Let's stop here, we're going to time.